In the dusty heart of Willow Springs, where desperate men bid on desperate women like cattle at market, 22-year-old Astor Caldwell stood unsold while every other girl found herself claimed, until the town's most broken widower stepped forward with an offer that would change everything. The October sun beat mercilessly against the wooden auction platform, casting harsh shadows across faces etched with want and worry. Astor pressed her palms against her faded blue dress, feeling the rough splinters of the boards beneath her feet. Around her, the other young women, 7 in total, shifted nervously as Mayor Hutchins bellowed prices like a man selling livestock. Sold. To Thomas Brennan for $47. The gavel cracked against wood as 17-year-old Lily May stumbled down the platform steps, her face pale as winter frost. One by one, Astor watched them go, each girl claimed by weathered hands and desperate eyes, each disappearing into marriages that promised survival over love. The crowd thinned as the afternoon wore on. Merchants packed their wares, children were called home for supper, and still Astor remained. The mayor's voice grew hoarse from calling bids that never came. $20. 15. 10. The numbers dropped like autumn leaves, and with them, her last shreds of dignity. Perhaps we should call it a day, Mayor Hutchins muttered, mopping sweat from his brow. Miss Caldwell, you might try again next month when the railroad brings more. $50. The voice cut through the dusty air like a blade through silk. Every head turned toward the back of the dispersing crowd where a tall figure emerged from the shadows of the mercantile. Grayson Vanderberg moved with the measured gait of a man who'd learned to carry grief like a second skin. His dark coat hung loose on his frame, and his steel-gray eyes held the kind of emptiness that comes from losing everything that matters. That Astor's breath caught. She knew that face. Everyone in Willow Springs knew it. The wealthy rancher who'd lost his wife and infant son to fever just 6 months prior. The man who'd locked himself away on his sprawling property, emerging only for supplies and speaking to no one. $50, he repeated, his voice steady despite the murmur that rippled through the remaining crowd. For Miss Caldwell. Mayor Hutchins blinked rapidly, clearly taken aback. Well, that is, are you certain, Mr. Vanderberg? The bidding was considerably lower. I said 50. Grayson's tone brooked no argument. He pulled a leather pouch from his coat and counted out the bills with methodical precision. Cash money. Astor felt the platform sway beneath her feet, though she knew it was solid as stone. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. The other girls had been bid on by farmers, shopkeepers, men looking for helpmates and mothers for their children. But Grayson Vanderberg? He was different. Dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with violence and everything to do with the hollow ache she could see in his eyes. Sold, then, the mayor announced, though his voice lacked its earlier enthusiasm. To Mr. Grayson Vanderberg for $50. The gavel's final crack echoed across the emptying square like a gunshot. Astor gathered her single carpet bag, everything she owned in the world, and made her way down the platform steps on unsteady legs. The crowd parted before her, their whispers following like smoke. Poor thing, going to that cursed ranch. Heard he speaks to his dead wife's ghost. Hasn't been right since the fever took them. Grayson waited at the bottom of the steps, his face unreadable. Up close, she could see the lines grief had carved around his eyes, the way his dark hair had begun to silver at the temples despite his being no more than 35. He was handsome still, achingly so, but it was the beauty of a winter landscape, stark and haunting and touched with something that might destroy you if you weren't careful. Ma'am, he said quietly, offering his arm. His touch was surprisingly gentle, his hand warm through the fabric of her sleeve. They walked in silence toward his wagon, a well-built affair with brass fittings that spoke of wealth and better times. The horses, a matched pair of chestnuts, stamped and tossed their heads as if eager to leave this place behind. Astor couldn't blame them. I have to ask, she said as he helped her onto the seat, his hands spanning her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. Why me? Why now? Grayson settled beside her, gathering the reins in his calloused hands. For a long moment, he said, nothing. Then, because you looked like you needed rescuing. The words hung between them like a challenge. Astor studied his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way he kept his gaze fixed on the horizon as if looking at her might break. something inside him. And you don't. His laugh was bitter as burned coffee. I'm beyond rescuing Miss Caldwell. But perhaps. He clicked his tongue, and the horses moved forward, carrying them away from the auction block and toward an uncertain future. Perhaps. We can save each other. The wagon wheels ground against the dusty road, and Willow Springs fell away behind them. Ahead lay the Vanderburg Ranch, 3,000 acres of prairie grass and painful memories. Astor had heard the stories. The elegant house where laughter once echoed through empty rooms. The nursery that remained exactly as it was the day fever claimed its tiny occupant. The man who wandered the halls at night, calling names that would never answer. But as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Astor felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Possibility. Dangerous, terrifying, beautiful possibility. What awaited her at the Vanderburg Ranch? And what had really driven this grieving widower to claim her when no one else would? The Vanderburg Ranch sprawled across the horizon like a kingdom carved from prairie dreams and heartbreak. As their wagon crested the final hill, Astor drew a sharp breath at the sight before her. A grand two-story house of white clapboard and wraparound porches, its windows gleaming gold in the dying light. Outbuildings dotted the landscape like scattered jewels, a massive red barn, stables that could house 30 horses, and quarters for the ranch hands who kept this empire running. "It's beautiful," she whispered, then immediately regretted speaking. The words seemed to wound him somehow, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the reins tighter. "It was," Grayson said simply. Once, they rode through the main gate beneath, an ornate iron arch bearing the ranch's name in scrollwork letters. The drive was lined with cottonwoods whose leaves rustled like whispered secrets in the evening breeze. But as they drew closer to the house, Astor began to notice the signs of neglect: shutters hanging askew, flower beds choked with weeds, and an eerie quiet that seemed to press against her ears like cotton. But a Mexican woman emerged from the house. As they approached, her dark hair streaked with silver and her weathered face creased with concern. She moved with the purposeful stride of someone who'd been running this household long before tragedy struck. "Senor Vanderburg," she called, wiping her hands on her apron. "You bring company?" "More than company, Rosa." Grayson climbed down from the wagon and moved to help Astor. "This is Miss Astor Caldwell. She's to be my wife." Rosa's eyebrows shot skyward, and she crossed herself quickly. "Dios mío. A wife? But senor, you haven't said anything about it's decided." His tone ended the discussion, but not before Astor caught the look that passed between them. Concern, confusion, and something that might have been pity. The house's interior took her breath away. Despite the neglect outside, Rosa had maintained the grandeur within. Persian rugs covered polished hardwood floors, and crystal chandeliers cast rainbow fragments across walls papered in silk. A sweeping staircase dominated the entrance hall, its banister carved from rich mahogany that gleamed like dark honey. But it was the silence that struck her most, the oppressive quiet of a home where laughter had died. "Rosa will show you to your room," Grayson said, already backing toward what appeared to be a study. We'll discuss arrangements tomorrow." "Wait." Astor caught his sleeve, feeling the lean strength of his arm beneath the fabric. "I don't understand. Are we truly to be married? Or am I simply another servant you've bought?" The question hung between them like a blade. Grayson's gray eyes met hers, and she saw something flicker there: pain, longing, and a desperate kind of hope that made her heart squeeze. "I don't know," he admitted quietly. "I only know I couldn't let you stand there unsold. Not when you looked the way you did." "And how did I look?" "Like someone who understood what it meant to lose everything." Before she could respond, he disappeared into his study, the door closing with a soft click that somehow sounded final. Rosa led her upstairs, her keys jangling softly as they climbed. The hallway stretched before them, lined with portraits of Vanderburg ancestors whose painted eyes seemed to follow their progress. At the far end, a door stood slightly ajar, revealing the corner of a small rocking chair and the edge of what appeared to be a crib. "The nursery," Rosa murmured, noticing her glance. "He won't let me close it proper," says she. "His wife, Isabella, she might need it when she comes back." Astor's stomach clenched. "She's gone. 6 months now. Her and the baby both." Fever took them in 3 days. Rosa's voice dropped to a whisper. But sometimes, late at night, I hear him in there, talking to them like they're still. She trailed off, crossing herself again as she pushed open a door halfway down the hall. This was Isabella's sewing room. I fixed it up best I could. The chamber was lovely, smaller than the master bedroom, but charming, with rose-patterned wallpaper and a window seat overlooking the ranch's western pastures. A four-poster bed dominated one wall, its quilt hand-stitched in shades of blue and cream. Someone had placed fresh wildflowers on the nightstand, their sweet fragrance a welcome contrast to the house's melancholy air. "Rosa," Astor said carefully. "What was she like?" "Isabella." The older woman's face softened. "Beautiful. Kind. She had a laugh like silver bells, and she could make the senor smile even on his darkest days. She loved this place, loved him with everything she had." Rosa's eyes grew distant. "When she died, it was like watching the sun go out. He hasn't been the same since. And now he's brought home a stranger from an auction block. See, which is why I wonder." Rosa studied her with sharp eyes. "What is it you're running from, Nina?" "Because a girl doesn't end up unsold at auction unless she's fleeing something terrible." Astor's hand moved instinctively to her throat, where faint bruises had finally faded, but the memory remained. "My stepfather," she said quietly. He tried to force himself on me after my mother died. When I fought him off, he sold me to pay his debts. Said I was too much trouble to keep." Rosa's expression darkened. "Men like that deserve to burn in hell." "Perhaps, but that doesn't solve my problem now." Astor moved to the window, watching, as the last light faded from the sky. "I'm trapped here with a man who bought me like livestock, in a house haunted by the ghost of a woman I can never replace." "Maybe you're not meant to replace her," Rosa said thoughtfully. "Maybe you're meant to help him remember what it feels like to be alive." Below in the yard, a figure emerged from the house, tall, solitary, walking with the measured pace of someone carrying an invisible burden. Grayson moved through the shadows toward the barn, his coat billowing behind him like dark wings. "He goes out every night," Rosa murmured, joining her at the window. "Rides the property for hours, sometimes until dawn, looking for something he'll never find." "What's he looking for?" "Peace, I think. Or maybe just the courage to keep living." As if sensing their scrutiny, Grayson paused and looked up at the window. Even from this distance, Astor could feel the weight of his gaze, the desperate hunger in those storm-gray eyes. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he turned away, disappearing into the barn's dark mouth. What secrets lay buried in the shadows of this grand house? And could a woman fleeing her own demons truly save a man determined to join his dead? Astor woke to the sound of weeping, soft, heartbroken sobs that drifted through the walls like smoke. She lay still in the pre-dawn darkness, her heart hammering against her ribs as she listened to the grief that had no name echoing through the corridors of the Vanderburg house. The crying stopped as suddenly as it had begun, leaving only the whisper of wind through the eaves and the distant lowing of cattle. She dressed quickly in her other gown, a simple gray wool that had seen better days, and crept downstairs, following the scent of coffee and cornbread to the kitchen. Rosa stood at the massive iron stove, her movements efficient despite the early hour. She looked up as Astor entered, her dark eyes knowing. "You heard him," Rosa said. "It wasn't a question. I heard someone." Astor accepted the cup of coffee Rosa offered, wrapping her fingers around its warmth. "Was it? He goes to the nursery every morning before dawn, talks to them like they're still sleeping in their beds." Rosa's voice carried the weight of months of witnessing such pain. "Some mornings he brings Isabella's brush, tells her about the ranch business. Other mornings he just sits in that rocking chair and..." She shrugged helplessly. "How long can a man carry such grief? Until it kills him, I think. Or until something stronger comes along to pull him back to the living." They ate breakfast in companionable silence as the sun painted the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold. Through the kitchen window, Astor could see the ranch hands beginning their daily routines, feeding horses, checking fences, moving cattle from one pasture to another. The Vanderburg operation ran like clockwork despite its master's broken heart. "There's something you should know," Rosa said, refilling Astor's coffee cup. "The townspeople, they whisper about this place. Say it's cursed, that Isabella's spirit can't rest. that she walks these halls searching for her lost baby. Do you believe that? Rosa was quiet for a long moment. I believe grief can make the dead seem more real than the living. And I believe your husband is drowning in memories he can't let go. The word husband sent a chill through Aster. Were they truly married? The auction had been legal, but no vows had been spoken, no preacher had blessed their union. She was something between a wife and a possession, existing in a liminal space that offered neither security nor freedom. Rosa, she said carefully, what would happen if I tried to leave? The older woman's face grew grave. Where would you go, Nina? You have no money, no family, no prospects. And the law would side with him. You're his property now, bought and paid for. The truth of it settled over Aster like a shroud. She was as trapped here as Grayson was trapped by his grief. Both of them prisoners in a house that reeked of loss and unfulfilled promises. The sound of boots on the kitchen's back porch interrupted her dark thoughts. Grayson entered without knocking, his hair still damp from washing and his face freshly shaved. In the morning light, she could see the toll his nightly vigils had taken, the hollow beneath his cheekbones, the shadows under his eyes, the way his clothes hung loose. On his frame, Miss Caldwell, he said formally, as if she were a guest he'd forgotten he'd invited. I trust you slept well. Well enough. She watched him pour coffee with steady hands, noting the calluses that marked him as a man who still worked alongside. His hands despite his wealth. And you? Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that she'd asked. I don't sleep much anymore. Haven't since, he trailed off, taking a long sip of coffee to cover the words he couldn't say. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken grief and uncertain futures. I've been thinking, he said finally, about our arrangement. What happened yesterday was impulsive. I may have acted without proper consideration for your wishes. Aster's pulse quickened. Was he offering her freedom? Or something else entirely? I'm prepared to honor the transaction, he continued, his voice carefully neutral. We can be married by the circuit preacher when he comes through next month. Or, he paused, studying her face. If you prefer, I can arrange passage for you to San Francisco. There are opportunities there for a woman of your qualities. What qualities would those be? The question seemed to catch him off guard. His gray eyes swept over her face, lingering on her mouth before meeting her gaze again. You're educated, well-spoken, beautiful. The last word came out rough, as if it had scraped his throat raw. And you need a wife who is all of those things. I need. He set down his cup with a sharp clink. I don't know what I need anymore. Only that when I saw you standing there, unwanted and alone, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Something that wasn't grief or emptiness or the crushing weight of memory. What did you feel? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, responsible. Like maybe I could save one thing from drowning, even if I couldn't save myself. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Aster found herself studying his face, the strong jaw, the way his dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, the mouth that might have been made for smiling in happier times. And if I stayed, she asked softly, if I became your wife, in truth, not just in transaction, what would you expect of me? The question seemed to pain him. I don't know if I can give you what a woman deserves from marriage. I'm not the man I was before Isabella died. I may never be that man again. I'm not asking you to be someone else. I'm asking what you'd want from me. Grayson stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the ranch's main yard. Companionship, perhaps. Someone to share meals with. To help me remember what it feels like to have another heartbeat in the house. And children. The word hit him like a physical blow. His shoulders went rigid, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. I buried my son 6 months ago. I can't. I won't risk that kind of loss again. But you'd risk marriage? He turned to face her, his eyes blazing with something that might have been anger or desperation or hope. With you? Yes. God help me, yes. But as Aster weighed his words, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows of the barn. Someone who had their own reasons for ensuring this unlikely union never found its footing. The figure emerged from the shadows 3 days later, when autumn's first frost had painted the prairie grass silver, and Aster had begun to believe she might find peace in this haunted house. His name was Jasper Crenshaw, and he wore his cruelty like a well-tailored coat, expensive, refined, and utterly without warmth. Well, well, he drawled from the front porch, his polished boots clicking against the painted boards. If it isn't, my dear stepdaughter, playing house with the grieving widower. Astor's blood turned to ice water. She'd been tending Isabella's neglected rose garden, trying to coax life back into the thorny stems, when his voice cut through the morning air like a blade. The pruning shears slipped from her nerveless fingers, clattering to the ground. Jasper. His name tasted like poison on her tongue. How did you find me? Did you think I wouldn't come looking for my investment? He stepped down from the porch, moving with the predatory grace of a man accustomed to taking what he wanted. $50 is a considerable sum. I have every right to ensure my property is being properly utilized. Grayson appeared in the doorway behind him, his face a mask of controlled fury. You have no rights here, Crenshaw. The transaction was legal and binding. Ah, but was it? Jasper's smile was sharp as winter. You see, Vanderberg, there's a small matter of documentation. The girl is underage, only 21, and I never gave proper consent as her legal guardian. I'm 22, Astor said, her voice stronger than she felt. And you're not my guardian. You're nothing to me. Such spirit, Jasper murmured, his pale eyes raking over her with familiar hunger. It's what I've always admired about you, my dear. Among other things. The implication in his voice made Grayson's hand move instinctively to the gun at his hip. You'll speak respectfully in my presence, or you'll leave my land. Permanently. Oh, I'll leave, Jasper said, his tone deceptively casual. But I'll be taking what belongs to me. You see, I've spoken with Judge Morrison. Fascinating conversation. Did you know that marriages by auction require a 30-day waiting period? Something about protecting young women from hasty decisions. Astor's world tilted. That's not true, isn't it? Jasper pulled a folded document from his coat. Legal injunction, signed and sealed. Miss Caldwell is to return to her lawful guardian's custody pending a proper hearing, which, given the judge's busy schedule, won't occur for, several months. The paper crackled in the morning breeze, and Astor could see the official seal that made her stomach lurch. Somehow, Jasper had found a way to manipulate the law to his advantage, again. Over my dead body, Grayson said quietly. That can be arranged. Jasper's coat fell open, revealing the pearl-handled pistol at his side. But let's not be hasty. I'm a reasonable man. Perhaps we can reach an accommodation. What kind of accommodation? The girl, plus, shall we say, $200 for my trouble? Consider it compensation for the inconvenience of tracking down stolen property. Astor felt the world spin around her. She was being bartered over like a prize heifer, her fate decided by men who saw her as nothing more than a commodity to be bought and sold. No, she said, her voice cutting through their negotiation like a whip crack. I won't go back with you, Jasper. I'd rather die first. His laugh was silk over steel. Oh, my dear girl, death might be preferable to what I have planned for you. You've caused me considerable embarrassment, running away like a common thief. I think some time in the cellar might cure you of such rebellious notions. The cellar. Astor's hand flew to her throat, remembering the 3 days she'd spent locked in that dank, rat-infested hole after she'd first refused his advances. The memory of it, the darkness, the cold, the way he'd whispered through the door about all the things he'd do to her when she was ready to be reasonable, made her knees weak. You're a monster, she whispered. I'm a businessman, he corrected. And you're a debt that needs collecting. Grayson stepped forward, his presence solid and protective at her back. She's my wife. The law may have technicalities, but marriage is marriage. Touch her, and I'll kill you. Your wife. Jasper's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. How fascinating. Tell me, Vanderberg, have you consummated this union? Because if not, well, it's hardly a marriage at all, is it? The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Astor felt heat flood her cheeks, partly from embarrassment, but mostly from the sudden, fierce wish that she could answer yes. That she could claim the protection of Grayson's name and body both. That's none of your concern, Grayson said, but something in his voice must have betrayed him because Jasper's smile widened. I see. Playing the gentleman, are we? How noble. How utterly foolish. He tucked the injunction back into his coat. I'll give you until tomorrow to decide, Vanderberg. The girl and $200, or I'll have the sheriff here with a warrant. And trust me, once she's back in my custody, you'll never see her again. He tipped his hat with mocking courtesy. Good day, Mrs. Vanderberg. I do hope you've enjoyed your brief taste of freedom. The sound of his horse's hooves faded into the distance, leaving Astor and Grayson standing in the rose garden like survivors of a battlefield. The autumn air felt sharp against her skin, carrying the scent of dying leaves and the promise of winter's approach. He can't do this, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. There has to be something. There is. Grayson's voice was grim. We make the marriage real. Tonight. Before he can file any more papers or buy any more judges. She turned to face him, seeing the resolve in his storm-gray eyes. You mean? I mean we become husband and wife in every sense of the word. It's the only way to protect you from him. But as the sun set over the Vanderberg ranch, painting the sky the color of blood and roses, neither of them realized that Jasper Crenshaw had one more card to play, one that would shatter their fragile hope and test the very foundations of their desperate alliance. That night, as the moon rose full and silver over the prairie, Astor stood before the mirror in Isabella's former sewing room, braiding her auburn hair with trembling fingers. The white cotton nightgown Rosa had provided, one of Isabella's, though neither woman had spoken of it, fell in soft folds around her ankles, a ghost garment for a ghost's replacement. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she called, expecting Rosa with some final words of wisdom or comfort. Instead, Grayson entered, carrying a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. He'd changed from his work clothes into a white shirt and dark trousers, his hair still damp from washing. In the lamplight, he looked younger somehow, less burdened by the weight of grief that usually shadowed his features. Thought you might need this, he said, pouring amber liquid into both glasses. I know I do. She accepted the whiskey, their fingers brushing as he handed it to her. The contact sent warmth shooting up her arm, and she saw him notice it too. The way his eyes darkened, the slight intake of breath. To survival, he said quietly, raising his glass. To second chances, she countered. They drank in silence, the whiskey burning away the last of their pretenses. Outside, the wind howled across the prairie, rattling the windows and making the house creak like a ship in a storm. But inside this room, with its rose-patterned wallpaper and the scent of lavender sachets, they existed in their own world. I want you to know, Grayson said, setting down his glass, that I won't take anything you don't freely give. Even if it means Crenshaw, he won't win. Astor stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. I won't. Let him destroy what we're building here. And what are we building? She reached up, tracing the line of his jaw with her fingertips. Something real. Something that belongs to us alone. His hand covered hers, pressing her palm against his cheek. I'm not the man I was before Isabella died. I may never be whole again. I don't need you to be whole, she whispered. I just need you to be here. With me. When he kissed her, it was with the desperate hunger of a man who'd forgotten what it felt like to want something other than oblivion. She tasted the whiskey on his lips, felt the roughness of his day's growth of beard against her skin, and knew that whatever happened tomorrow, this moment would be theirs forever. The rest came naturally, clothes falling away like shed skins, hands discovering the geography of desire, 2 damaged souls finding solace in each other's arms. When he moved over her, his eyes never left hers, as if he were memorizing every expression, every sigh, every flutter of her lashes. Are you certain? He asked, his voice rough with want and restraint. I've never been more certain of anything. Afterward, they lay entwined in the narrow bed, her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. The lamp had burned low, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called across the prairie. Tell me about her, Astor said softly. Isabella. She felt him tense beneath her, but then his hand began stroking her hair with gentle fingers. She was light, pure light. She could make the darkest day seem bright just by walking into a room. You loved her very much. I thought I'd die when she did. Some days I wished I had. His voice was barely a whisper. But tonight I remembered what it felt like to be alive. She lifted her head to look at him, seeing the wonder in his eyes. And how does it feel? Terrifying. Beautiful. Like standing at the edge of a cliff and choosing to fly instead of fall. Dawn was breaking over the eastern mountains when Rosa's frantic knocking shattered their peaceful cocoon. Senor, Senora, come quickly. There's smoke on the horizon. They dressed hastily, Grayson helping her with the buttons on her dress while she pinned up her hair. Through the window, they could see a dark column of smoke rising from the direction of town, and even from this distance, the acrid smell of burning would reach their nostrils. In the kitchen, Rosa met them with eyes wide with fear. It's the church, she gasped. Miguel rode in from town. Someone set fire to the church last night. The preacher, he's dead. Aster felt the blood drain from her face. The circuit preacher, the one who was supposed to marry them legally next month, was gone. And with him, their last hope of making their union unbreakable in the eyes of the law. Crenshaw, Grayson snarled, his hand moving to his gun. That bastard, no. Aster caught his arm. He's too clever for that. He'll have an alibi, witnesses, to place him somewhere else. This is just another move in his game. But even as she spoke, she could see the calculation in Grayson's eyes. Without the preacher, without legal marriage, she was still vulnerable. Still property to be claimed and bartered. There's something else, Rosa said reluctantly. Miguel says Judge Morrison is coming out this afternoon. With papers. And Sheriff Hawkins. The trap was closing. Jasper had eliminated their escape route and was now moving in for the kill. But as Aster looked at Grayson's face, saw the determination there, the fierce protectiveness that had replaced his earlier despair, she felt her own resolve harden. Let them come, she said quietly. We'll face them together. Grayson's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. Together, he agreed. Outside, the sun climbed higher, burning away the mist and revealing the full scope of their ranch. 3,000 acres of rolling prairie, countless cattle, a house that had learned to hold love again. It was worth fighting for. They were worth fighting for. As they stood on the porch, watching the road for signs of approaching riders, Aster felt a peace she'd never known before. Whatever came next, she was no longer the unsold girl from the auction block. She was Aster Vanderberg, and she had found her place in the world. The sound of hoofbeats echoed across the prairie, carrying with them the promise of a final confrontation that would determine not just their fate, but the very meaning of love, freedom, and the courage to claim both. Well now, that's a tale worth telling around any campfire. Like this story of love conquering all odds. Subscribe for more tales from the frontier and let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from today, partners?